my relationship with America is much like a divorce. Like, there's no happy divorce story, is there? Oh, well, one day we just realized, hey, we hate each other. Whoa! What is the Russian dream? I think it's something, it's something that's attractive to people. It's going to be this whole traditional values and being connected to the past while having a nice 21st century lifestyle. Okay, so get this. Unusual. Oh, that's a tough one. Then I guess it would have to be Chukotka, because it's a place in Russia, okay? But there's no trees. In America, modernity came in and affected the Eskimos, and in Russia, communism affected them. They had to, vote for Lenin. They even have a flag with Lenin's face on it and some sort of, at the party Lenina.
Zvezda Holding presents Dynamic Spectrum Talks. Now.
Hello everyone, this is the Dynamic Spectrum podcast on the air. I am Anna Shafran and this is my colleague Yuri Lindra.
Hello everyone.
This is the territory of free speech, friendship and shared trust. And here we talk with guests from all over the world about the commonalities we all share, about common problems and common aspirations, and together we try to look beyond the horizon and to take a step towards a better future for all. And our aim is to remove artificially created dividing lines between peoples and nations.
And our guest today is very interesting. It's Timothy Kirby, an a Russian journalist with American roots or American origin.
Of American origin. That's how people write about me.
Right. Russian journalist, American origin.
Yes,
am I right?
Yes, of American origin.
Of American origin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A radio host who lives in Russia for quite a long time and considers Russia as a second home or maybe the primary home.
After sanctions and all that, Russia's my only home, my friend. But I do still, consider myself American. I play American football here in Russia as my hobby, and so I do not reject Americanness. However, I'm here now forever. I do not reject Americanness, but I accept Russianness. How about that?
Perfect. And you also have a special YouTube channel where you share your impressions and lifestyle here in Russia.
In Russian, it's called the Most Russian American, Sami Ruski Amerikanets, and that's about traveling across Russia, the lives of interesting foreign people who are here, and some other random stuff. So, that's kind of my main gig.
Hello, Tim. We glad to see you back in the studio, and we've known each other for a long time.
Yeah.
We are glad that you agreed to be our guest in our studio in our new project.
It's always easy to work in my native language. In fact, it's a rare thing, so this is a bit of a treat for me. It's an easy day at work,
Please tell to the audience a little bit about yourself, your story, and first of all, why Russia?
Okay, so if to do this quickly, because I actually wrote a whole book about why I moved to Russia, because people to this day keep asking. But anyways, I'm from Cleveland, Ohio, in the United States. I grew up in the ghetto, and in the ghetto, life isn't that fun. And a lot of the problems we have in modern America that people see on their screens, like these homeless crisis in California, or this bizarre thing they call DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, that it basically gives racial preferences for certain people to get jobs over others. I could feel all this coming in Cleveland in the 90s. I experienced all this stuff that's happening now back then. And my ancestors all came from the Russian Empire with its 1914 borders. So I thought I'd go back to Eastern Europe because life in the United States wasn't working for me. Essentially, I was kind of a loser in the system, and I didn't want to be a loser my whole life. So I needed to restart somewhere else, especially somewhere else where I look like everybody else. And that's what I did, and that's where I am now.
So please tell a bit more about your story, because it's not a common story when a foreigner, especially from the United States, decide to radically change his or her lives and to move to Russia. So how you came to the realization that you need to go overseas, and particular to Russia, and what did you do in the United States? What was your
the
job?
realization is that my college education, or as Russians would call it, university education, came to an end, and this is what my life looked like. I lived in a house on the southern hills of Pittsburgh, not St. Petersburg, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and it was a rented house, and I lived with 3 other guys, right? Who I didn't know too well. The one guy, he was from my neighborhood in Cleveland, and I didn't even have enough money to really heat the house in winter. We only had enough money to pay to keep it so the pipes wouldn't explode from getting too cold. And my life consisted of working a lot, paying rent, and having an occasional cheeseburger. I couldn't afford a car. And I actually worked at that time, you won't believe it, but in the fashion industry. And I could sort of look at my future, and I was like, well, this is it. This is the end of the road. And furthermore, if we're going to be really honest, especially when you're a man and you're younger, that's not a really good position to be in if you want to get married, you know, or find a woman. Living in some sort of weird rental house with 3 black guys, who only one of whom you actually know fairly well, is not a good strategy. And so I had to make a big change. So, and just to be clear, it's not that they're bad, that they're black. I just wanted to be clear that I was living with essentially random people. It's not like they were my cousins. Like I said, the one guy I knew well, so I could stand living with him for a long time. He was cool.
I'm very sorry, but it is very strange because a lot of people from all over the world come to America because of American dream.
Well, maybe, but that depends, you know. And if you look at things now, I could see sort of the trajectory where the American dream, as a lot of people interpret it, as being stuff, the stuff is getting harder and harder to attain. The American dream, as in coming from another country, restarting your identity from scratch and having the opportunity to essentially, again, start over. Maybe that's still around. Maybe that's still possible for some people. But I already could see that I was on the losing end of the stick. You know, it just things weren't going to work out. So I had to do something radical and something different. And also, to be more blunt, like I said, no women. Men are. I'll put it this way: there's a deep connection between a lack of women in your life and suicide among men. And that's blunt how it is. So something had to change. So I later served in Kazakhstan in the U.S. Peace Corps, service with no gun. Just to be clear, a lot of Russians don't understand that, but so I was a U.S. State Department employee for 2 years, friends. Ooh, I was on the bad guy team.
Almost colleague from the diplomatic service, but not the diplomat. I mean, you were in the security staff.
Volunteer. That was teaching English and helping out at a business incubator. That's what that looked like. And with life in Kazakhstan, I leave America, and in America, my status was like the Indian caste system. At the bottom of the Indian caste system, you have the untouchables. People who are so vile and repulsive that they can't even be physically touched. That was my status in America. I go to Kazakhstan, and all of a sudden, I'm not a piece of crap anymore. I'm a human being, similar to other people. And in fact, being a Western person in the early 2000s in Kazakhstan, I would actually say I had an automatic status boost where I was maybe had more status than, say, the average person in Kazakhstan, be they Russian or Kazakh or Tatar or whoever. So yeah, I felt that immediately, and it would be hard to go back. Why? You know what I mean? It's kind of like... It would be like, from a Russian perspective, like some kind of like a Tajik migrant worker. If he could click his fingers and not be a Tajik migrant worker anymore, he probably would. And that's what I did. So there you go.
Fantastic. Okay, yeah. Let's change topic.
Oh, sorry, you asked. The one thing you guys have to understand is that if someone leaves their country of origin, it's for a depressing, sad reason. That's why I tell people my relationship with America is much like a divorce. Like, there's no happy divorce story, is there? Oh, well, you know, one day we just realized, hey, we hate each other. Whoa! People don't have happy divorce stories. So I sort of divorced America. So the story's going to be sad, guys. Sorry. You know? Sorry, that's the reality of
Very
things.
clear, yeah.
But at the end, you have improved your karma. You get extra 100 points, and you.
Oh, maybe
Really?
about that. We'd have to talk to God directly, and unfortunately, I can't organize that.
Okay, Russia,
Yeah.
traveling.
Yes.
What's the most unusual place in Russia that you have managed to visit? Maybe the city of Magadan or Chukotka in the Russian Arctic, and what were your impressions?
Unusual. Oh, that's a tough one. Well, then I guess it would have to be Chukotka because it's a place in Russia, okay? But there's no trees. I mean, everywhere else in Russia, there are trees. There are places in Russia like Dagestan where there are less trees, but there are still trees. And you go there, not a tree to be seen. And in fact, because Russians consider the birch tree to be like the national symbol tree or whatever, like how Canadians have the maple leaf on their flag, Russians have the birch tree, right? And but in Chukotka, there's actually a miniature birch tree that looks more like a bush, and that's it. So you have like a 1 meter tall birch tree. So I guess it's still part of Russia, but it's a very alien, different world. There's a video game called Death Stranding made by the legendary Hideo Kojima, and it's about sort of a crazy apocalyptic event happens, and everything is different. Reality is different. The physics of the world are different, and people have to survive in this bizarre, twisted Earth, right? And that's what Chukotka looks like. It looks like this video game where there's a rain that manipulates time, and there are ghosts all over the place that can grab you and take your soul away and all this stuff. And that's what it looks like, 1-to-1. In fact, only later I found out that they went to Iceland to get the imagery for that. And so Chukotka is, I guess, kind of like Iceland. But anyways, you play Death Stranding, you'll go to Chukotka. It's the same thing. So it's a wild place, very, very different, and like you even mentioned Murmansk, right? Murmansk is crazy cold. But people in Murmansk don't think about their daily survival. Whereas when you're out there in Chukotka and some of these remote places, you really have to kind of like plan. If you're going to go somewhere, you have to plan out like, I'm going to be on a snowmobile for how many hours? I'm going to need to have this much food. There's even a lot of stories people are saying about how it might be better in certain circumstances to wear an adult diaper and pee yourself rather than stop to take a bathroom break in certain circumstances. So survival is sort of a big question for people up there, and also, of course, Eskimo culture is maybe the most different. Like if you look at Russians and Dagestani, right? The people in Dagestan, you could see that there's definitely some overlay. You could see it's sort of like they're like Russians, but with an Islamic filter. But like the whole Eskimo thing, it's so different. The food is different. The look is different. The history is different. And the fact that Eskimos are also located in America too is also really fascinating.
But really, if we compare Alaska, for example, and Chukotka, what can you...
Well, the problem is I never got to go to Alaska. Remember, I'm a poor person from America, so I didn't really have the chance to see that much of America. But I don't know. You'd have to ask someone who's been to Alaska. But judging by a lot of the videos and stuff I've seen of it, it does look kind of similar, yeah.
You see, indigenous people, they still live the life they used to live for thousands of years. So the civilization actually didn't affect them much. And it means that they should be more or less the same.
Well, they do remain their distinct culture. But we have to remember that our friends, the communists, didn't like the way the Eskimos were living in Russia. So in America, modernity came in and affected the Eskimos. And in Russia, communism affected them. They had to, the vote for Lenin, they even have a flag with Lenin's face on it and some sort of, at the party of Lenin, but written in Eskimo language, right? But the flag is made out of seal skin, like dead seals, but it's still Lenin, right? So they were forced into this sort of like communal thing, and apparently it was very destructive because the communists moved them to locations which weren't really the best for hunting. Like when they were on their own in the Russian Empire, they all sort of, one family would be here, then 2 kilometers down the coast there'd be another family, and they sort of had this perfectly planned out for their survival, right? And the communists go in and say, everyone must live communally, everyone must live together, and they shoved the Eskimos together against their will, and it created a lot of problems which exist to this day. So,
Okay.
Well, remember...
And as for positive places?
It is a positive place. I mean, everywhere has problems. Even I love the Moscow region, Chekhov, Rodina Mat. I love my little city there, Chekhov, but there's problems everywhere.
I mean, New Chekhov, that is nearby Moscow.
Yeah.
Moscow South. Okay. Let's shift our discussion a little bit towards your professional activity to the journalism.
Sure thing.
Yeah. You worked as a radio and TV presenter in our country, in Russia, in your country.
Correct.
In your country.
Yes.
Tell us a
Well,
little
thank
bit. Let me clarify, yes, because Timothy Kirby is a Russian citizen.
No, we need to say it in our great country.
In our great country.
In our great country.
But we will discuss it a little bit later.
Yeah.
So, you worked as a radio and TV presenter. Tell us a little bit about this part of your life, the career and the experience, why you came to this profession, and how did you feel?
Okay. Well, when I, again, came to Russia, this would then be the mid-2000s. Okay, so 2006, 7, 8, 9, and the birth of YouTube. And at that time, I'd meet a lot of new people, as you do, and everyone's always surprised because I have an accent, which was even worse back then. And so whenever I'd meet a new person, the conversation would eventually, it would immediately go something like this. Why would you come to Russia? Everything here is so awful. Why would you live here? This is so stupid. Again and again and again. And you left, but I mean, this is over and over and over, month after month. And so I started to make videos on what was then the very beginning, the very birth of YouTube, about some of my opinions or about, the way things actually kind of look in America and some of the problems there versus the problems in Russia. And they became extremely popular, like crazy popular. And so thanks to a few viral videos, after that, I was able to start doing work for RT and Radio Mayak, which would be Lighthouse Radio in English. And that's where my media career began. And it has gone pretty well to this day.
And in 2018, you became a Russian citizen.
Correct.
Was it a difficult decision and process?
Well, the process, because I actually have been involved in the creation of this new law that makes it easier for Western foreigners to come here in Russia. I've, let's just say, contributed my 2 cents to that process. And I can tell you that immigrating to Russia, who knows how it's going to be now, but back then, no, it's extremely difficult, extremely difficult. You really had to be a master of bureaucracy, and furthermore, you really had to be essentially either married to a Russian citizen or you wouldn't be able to come here. And so, in fact, probably one of the worst experiences of my life was going through all of that immigration bureaucracy. The very final phase of getting citizenship was the easiest one because at the time, you couldn't have dual citizenship. And I still wanted to visit my parents, and also as someone who talks about America in the Russian media, I wanted to be able to still experience America. And so I organized to get some help from people like Margarita Simonyan and Anatoly Wasserman, kind of guided me along the way to getting citizenship via the presidential signature. However, in 2 years, in 2020, they got rid of the ban on having dual citizenship. So it doesn't matter anymore. I could have waited 2 years. But anyways, the last phase was the easiest because I had some help. The whole, permanent residency thing. Oh, that was just a living nightmare. Yeah.
And is it true that many Americans are now considering the possibility of moving to Russia? And why?
Well, yeah, I read somewhere, I think it was even the Russian press, the Western press, that there's already been something like 1,400 letters written to various Russian embassies about now moving to Russia after this law has been released. And that was a few weeks ago. So maybe they're already up to 2,000, which also, when you think about it, that's not 1,400 individuals, but more probably 1,400 families or units of people, right? Groups of people. So yeah, the interest was always there. And one of the reasons why I was an advocate for so long to changing the migration laws is because people constantly hound me about moving to Russia. You know, you constantly get asked, how can I move to Russia? How can I move to Russia? How can I move to Russia? So then essentially you get, it's like a stream of logic. I want to move to Russia, Tim. How do I do it? Are you married? Yes or no? Yes, I'm married and I have 4 wonderful children. You can't move to Russia.
Why?
Because you need a legal basis to move to Russia. This is before the new laws. If you're married and you're a Westerner, there's no legal basis for you to move to Russia. You have no foot in the door, you can't. No. Okay, so what if you're not married? This is where the frustrating thing about Western people begins. Okay, so you're not married. Well, then, guess what, pal? Your only option is to try to find a Russian when we get married. I am not going to get married for the sake of citizenship. Calm down. If you were in America and you were moving from New York to Idaho, wouldn't you want to look for girls to meet online who live in Idaho? Because that's where you're going to be? Is that evil or wrong? No, but for some reason, they didn't like this idea of meeting people online and getting married and stuff. They didn't like that. So that essentially created a real barrier. At some point, then, out of, again, frustration, I took personal initiative, and that's when I created this American Village that you've heard about. That was to get around, thanks to having the right set of signatures from important people, to get around this. So if someone buys land in a house in the American Village, Rosotrudnichtvo would sort of be the guarantor. Can't even speak English. The guarantor of them being able to get through the migration quota and start a life in Russia. The American Village still exists, even though the laws have changed, because still you still have to have a place to live to immigrate to Russia, and the American Village can provide that. So yeah, so I've both on my own created a solution to this problem, and collectively with other people was able to change the laws in Russia. And this is another thing when people ask me now, well, Tim, do you have any regret, do you regret moving to Russia? Well, my answer is, in America, I was basically a homeless person. In Russia, I can change the laws. The laws. I'm on a committee, like Biden was on a committee for a lot of years. I'm on that level. I ain't going back. Sorry.
By the way, I'm sorry, because I don't know exactly now, after laws has changed, if a man married, he can move to Russia.
Yes, Western men can, because the justification to move to Russia is this new presidential decree. That solves that problem. And that's why families now can move to Russia.
It's great because we started our discussion with 100 points you got in Kazakhstan. Now you got 1,000 small points in Russia because
something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah. Well, definitely. Yeah, I feel like I have a lot more status because I get invited onto lovely shows like your program. And again, I had 2 dreams as a child. Dream number 1 was to play American football. Well, I wanted to play in the NFL, but there were problems with that, and I don't think I had the health. But I made it to the big leagues in Russia.
Perfect.
Dream number 2. So play American football in the big leagues. I made that happen in Russia. Dream number 2, become an influential person. You know, when I was a teenager, you start to find out about people like Kissinger and Brzezinski and some of these other ones. You're like, wow, this whole thing of these think tanks, these people who behind the scenes build the ideology that drives society. That's awesome. And I became one of those people. So again, I to this day from Russian people, they're like, well, when are you going to leave? All my dreams came true here. Why leave?
No regrets.
I don't understand. So, so what we have now, it's very interesting. So, according to you, what we have, we can talk about Russian dream?
Oh, well, for me
instead of American dream.
Well, so remember, that was an individual story, and then there's the bigger story for everyone. I don't think everyone who's going to move to Russia is going to magically have their childhood dreams come true, especially my weird childhood dreams, you understand? However, one thing that we can say is if we're starting to think about what is the Russian dream, I think it's something, it's something that's attractive to people. It's going to be this whole traditional values and being connected to the past, while having a nice 21st century lifestyle. Okay, so get this. In America, in theory, there are people who do live an actual traditional lifestyle. They're around there. I can tell you two groups, the Amish and Hasidic Jews. It's very difficult to become a Hasidic Jew. It's difficult to become Amish, but it's possible. But still, these people live a traditional lifestyle, but it's a hard traditional lifestyle. It demands a lot of work because they are living like their ancestors did for hundreds of years to the best of their ability, and that's hard. In Russia, I think more our mission is, how do we get the best of that old style of life and put it in the 21st century context so it's more natural, so you're not in a constant fight against reality. And I think that might be the Russian dream. Because if you look across the country, what have the Russian people unanimously agreed on? When the president says traditional values, the masses in Russia say, yes, we want this. But then you ask, okay, what do traditional values look like? No gays and stuff. That's about all they have. So we have this sort of vision of what we want, but we haven't in Russia worked it out. I could work it out, like I said, as a wonderful good guy version of Henry Kissinger. I could work it out, but unfortunately, I got to pay the bills. So that's, I think, one of our big missions in Russian society is how do we create a society of traditional values when traditional values came from, especially for Russians, from the medieval period. And we do not live like medieval people. We have the same genetics. I think we have the same hopes and desires and emotions that people in medieval times did, but we do not have the same lifestyle, and we can't have the same lifestyle. So how do we do that? How do we bring the medieval times to today? So that's our mission. That's our Russian dream.
Okay, the lifestyle, you just exceeded my next question, so let me combine two questions in one.
Yes.
The lifestyle, could you please tell the differences or maybe similarities between the lifestyle of both countries, I mean Russia and the United States, especially if we're talking about the ordinary people, the mass level. And secondly, of course, we need to ask you, as an American, as a Russian of American origin, about neoliberal agenda, which, as we all know, came mostly from the United States. What do ordinary people in America think about it?
Well, it's really hard to say who believes in what, but the one thing about America that Americans themselves, so like I just mentioned, Russia's challenge is how to build a society based on traditional values in the 21st century. America's challenge to itself is, how do we deal with the fact that liberalism suits everyone? Whether you're some sort of woke, colorful-haired weirdo, or you're like a Pat Buchanan type guy in a suit, everyone in America is liberal, okay? And what do I mean by that? So if we talk to some woke nutcase rainbow people, they're going to talk about, gender is just some sort of concept, and if you want to have gender reassignment surgery, you want to change your gender, you go nuts. You can modify your body in any way you want, this, that, or the other, and in fact you should. This, which sounds insane. But if you talk to someone who's like a more like conservative, supposedly American, well, they really do believe that you have the right to do whatever you want with your body. They just don't want the government to pay for it or to see it on TV or to have it be promoted. But if you ask a libertarian, can you sell your body for money? Yes. So essentially, one of the reasons why America's sort of stuck in this big feedback loop is because ultimately everyone really believes in these sort of wild liberal meanings, liberal ideology. And a lot of people who are the more conservatives can't understand that liberal beliefs are very much in contrast to having a strong society. If you really put all your chips on individualism, then you're not going to have a very cohesive society, and everyone's going to do what they want. But so these people I'm trying to explain that the conservatives complain that everyone does whatever they want and there's no society and everything's breaking down, but they advocate for a ideology that says everyone should just do whatever they want. You see what I mean? And that's the real challenge that America faces is, how does America remain its Americanness or its liberalness, but then reforge having a society? Because again, back in the 1800s when Americans believed in God, you had the government saying you can do whatever you want, but God saying you definitely can't do whatever you want. Now that God is gone, the government says do whatever you want. And society falls apart.
This is what I'm talking about. There is an internal conflict because if you say that everything is possible, it depends only on you and on your personal feelings. And then, at the other hand, you say, no. There is only one direction we follow. Let's say neoliberal agenda or, for example, any other. It doesn't matter. So you cannot combine it together because they go opposite ways.
Yeah. So then that's the difference between Russia. Because in Russia, we sort of inherited a Western system from the 90s. But in Russia, we can say we have a man and a woman. And if there's a 40-kilogram bag of cement, you're a man, you're picking it up.
Definitely.
That's it. And in Russia, that's fine. That doesn't violate our rules. But if you think about it, if we're going to have this true, pure individualism, liberalism, then who knows? We can't have that. So in Russia, we can have this concept of male and female, and that men have these obligations, women have these obligations, and that there are different types of people, and so on and so forth. Whereas in America, the only sort of two types of persons there are, really in a legal sense, is people under 18 are children, and people over 18 are non-children. But even the woke liberals are attacking that. In terms of like gender reassignment surgery, and already they're starting to try to get rid of this whole even divide between age, so that way there's no divide. Whereas in Russia, we're happy to be labeled men and women, old, young, and whatever. That's not a problem for our ideology here.
Could you tell us about the problem of illegal migration to the United States?
Well, supposedly there are 30 million illegal immigrants in the United States. There's plenty of illegal immigrants in Russia, too, but let's just put it this way. Their destiny is a lot less sweet because with the exception of a few scandals that were exposed, they're not getting anything from the state. However, unfortunately, thanks to our liberal, true super left-wing liberal friends who finance all this crap, a lot of people come through the border and they get treated very well, and they get to live off of the tax dollars of my parents and people like them. So it's a huge problem because if 30 million illegal immigrants are in the United States and the population of the United States is somewhere over 300 million people, that's roughly 1 in 10 people is there illegally and is being paid for or subsidized or potentially exploited. It's a real bad problem. And as we know, when we have the absolute, because remember, when we have nice international forums, like let's say in Russia, who comes? The absolute best of the world comes. Your different ministers, your different journalists, your different philosophers, they come. When you have mass illegal immigration, the absolute worst of the world comes to your country. And so 30 million of the worst people on the planet have broken their way into the United States for various reasons. And that is not a boon to the U.S., But so it's kind of a sad situation, and it's one of the reasons why Trump is popular, because he is against it, or at least that's what he says.
Okay, you mentioned Trump. This is why I just must ask you the following question. The attention of the whole world currently focus on the United States because of the presidential elections.
Yes.
And because there is a struggle between the two parties. And how do you think, we will not discuss who will win or who not, it's irrelevant.
Okay.
What should change after the elections, or what cannot change even if Trump or Harris or anyone else will win the elections?
Okay.
From your perspective.
So to fix the United States, number one is unfortunately, and this probably sounds not good from an American who lives overseas and works in the Russian media, but really to save the United States, it's going to have to be some major constitutional changes. Our main problem is actually, ironically, it's really the whole corruption of how people get into Congress. We could keep the system the same, but there has to be some way to make it so that way the elections are more fair, that one citizen gets one vote, and that the lobbyists from various countries and corporations can't finance all of our politicians. That's the problem. There's always the joke that our politicians should wear outfits like race car drivers, because race car drivers are covered in advertisements from head to toe, because all of our politicians have to get financed from somewhere. The salary to be in Congress is something like $200,000 a year. Maybe it's become more, but the cost of the average campaign to enter Congress is $1,600,000. And all the congressmen leave Congress making money. So that makes you think, where does this money come from? And that's what creates problems like we're having in Ukraine, and the aggression of the United States outside of its borders is because it's very profitable, right? So the whole electoral issue is one issue that would need to actually be solved on a constitutional level. Leave the power to the states, but at least make it that way in each state, there's maybe campaigns are financed. Maybe all the voting systems have to be identical. All the ballots are identical. Make it easier for third, fourth, fifth parties to enter the race, because in the past I did interviews with all the major third parties in America, and their number one challenge is just getting on the ballot. That is their number one most difficult, most expensive problem, is getting on the ballot. Really, only the Green Party of the United States can get on the ballot in all 50 states, which is idiotic. It's a horrible problem. The other thing that would help to then save America is we're going to have to sit down, and we're going to have to find a philosophical answer of how we can sort of be liberal but yet have a society. One answer to that has been called Christian nationalism. That's just some sort of offering to it, but we have to find some mechanism, or be it some constitutional changes that create an us. So there is an America that's highly individualistic, but so that way there is an us, a group of people and a way of doing things. Because again, one of the things that Trump tried to do, if you listen, is if Trump wants to get everyone in America on the same page. We're speaking English. We're going to believe in the Constitution and a certain set of values. He's really this sort of uniting factor. Why? Because America is disunited. And again, like I said, you can't unite America as being a super hyper liberal society, because that type of society can't be united. Okay? So that's another key issue. Those are the real key issues that face America. After that happens, then I think a lot of the other problems would fall into place. You see what I mean? Because just imagine if the gigantic companies with all this power that operate out of America, first off, couldn't offshore themselves. They had to be a part of American society. And what if they were responsible, to the American government for their behavior? That would be a whole new day in America, wouldn't it? So those are what I would say are the real issues that need to be solved.
So, and the last question, which has become a tradition in our podcast, what can we do on people-to-people level to restore and maintain at least constructive, normal relations while governments prefer to remain hostile?
Oh, that's a much better question than when Vladimir Posner asks what people would say to God. So much better. Oh boy, this is a tough one. What can they do is, get around the censorship, because I don't know where we're going now, but it seems more and more like the censorship is just biting more and more, and it's getting harder to maintain contact. I think one of the good things about our modern era and social media is that it allows people to meet people and get information from other places, right? And we need to maintain that. We need to, regardless of censorship, Russian people say that there's this whole thing of like people's diplomacy, I think, which that expression comes from the Soviet Union, that every person in Russia is responsible to be like a little miniature diplomat for Russia. Okay? Well, if you're going to do that, then you're going to have to get your VPN going. You're going to have to get around all these barriers, and you're going to have to accept that communicating with other people in other countries is not as easy as it was, say, 5 years ago, and not give up, But I also ask kind of Russians to not be so whiny when they talk to Western people. Stop whining.
We will remain optimistic, don't worry.
Timothy.
Yeah.
As we knew, Timothy Denisovich Kirby.
Yes.
A Russian journalist of American origin. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for this very interesting communication program.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Like I said, it was a real treat to speak English.
Hope to see you again in our studio.
Thank you.
You will.
Thank you.
Zvezda Holding presents Dynamic Spectrum Talks. Now.